Hey everybody, what's going on? BornforXP here, and today we got some new Hearthstone cards coming out in the Journey to uNgoRo packs that will be released in mid-April. So this first card, obviously you can see Magma Avatar. Now this works off the new elemental, the new elemental subtype or tribe, if you will. If you played an elemental last turn, gain +1/+1 and spell damage +1. Now, I've seen some of the elementals, some of the elemental cards, and this is definitely doable. There are turn 2 elementals that you can play out, which would, of course, then turn into this, which would be a 4/4 for 3, and has spell damage +1. It's a mage elemental, which is interesting. I haven't really seen too many of the mage cards yet, but there are a few that I will be revealing today. So this is just the first one. I think it'll be all right because it's a card. So yeah, let's move on to the next card. We got Big Time Recruits. Draw 3 8-cost minions from your deck. It's a Paladin spell for 5. Now, I don't think this is going to be a very good card. Specifically, so the other version of this is the Small Time Recruits. And I believe that's a 3 cost and allows you to draw 3 1-cost minions from your deck. Now, that's good in Paladin, because it allows you, especially if you're running a hand buff deck, you get 3 1-cost minions into your hand, play out your hand buffs, and then you can play out these like really cheap minions that are actually buffed up and they're pretty dangerous. So that card's somewhat good. Now, Big Time Recruits, I don't really see being quite as effective. There's not a whole lot of 8-cost minions to run in Paladin. And especially since this is, you'd pretty much have to play it later in the game. And then, like, even if you did play this card, you're still gonna have to wait a couple turns to play an 8-cost minion, or if you're drawing it like towards the end of the game, you basically just don't wanna. You're basically gonna want to play an 8-cost minion rather than this, and so I don't think this is gonna be a very good card in Standard, especially with Pirate Warriors getting that big buff from this recent set. I don't know if all of you saw the card that says destroy a pirate and gain +1/+1. So that's really just buffing pirates. So let's move on to the next card. We got a druid card here called Living Nature. Now, one of the new keywords in Journey to uNgoRo, in case you all haven't noticed before, is adapt. And what adapt is you discover an ability. So it could be like taunt, could be spell damage, could be charge. Basically, you play a minion with adapt and you discover one of 3 abilities. And there's like 8 abilities, but it shows you 3 and you pick one and that minion gets it. So this spell for 5 says adapt a minion and then summon 2 2/2 treants with the same adaptation. Now, in my mind, the best adaptation you could get out of this card is, I want to say taunt, because it gives you two taunt minions up. Well, sorry, it would give you 3 taunt minions up technically, and 2 of them are 2/2s. Alternatively, I think charge would be a good one, because this could potentially be a good late game sweep if you play pretty much any minion for less than 5 and then you charge him right into the face and then charge the other 2/2s into the face. That's a lot of damage potential right there, but it's got to be really late game if you're going for that kind of play. So taunt is really sort of the thing that I'd be looking for. I'd have to consider some of the other adaptations to see really how valuable this card can be in Standard. But also considering that I'm not quite sure what all is rotating out now. I think Ramp Druid might still be a viable option rather than this. I don't see this being ran in Ramp Druid really at all. So you never know. We got Northrend Valkyr coming up next here. It's a priest card. It's a 3-cost, 1/2 death rattle. Summon a random friendly minion. Now, priest with resurrect has always been somewhat of a threat, and Dragon Priest is really getting a big nerf with this recent rotation. A lot of the Dragon Priest stuff is rotating out. So I'm expecting to see a lot more sort of control priest, and I think this is going to be an okay card, I want to say. I don't think it's going to be ran quite as often, specifically just because it's a 1/2, not very good stats, like really understated. But it does summon a random friendly minion that died this game. Unfortunately, it's not a battle cry, because then I could really see it being ran out. It is a death rattle instead, unfortunately, which means you pretty much have to wait at least a turn before it can really have its effect. But it is also N'Zoth-able. I don't really think that's quite a good card for N'Zoth to pull out though. So I don't know if I see this card being run in standard priest decks really. But maybe in a few like tech control priests. So this is the 5th card that I got showing out here. It's Karosa the Exterminator. Now this is an 8-cost 6/8 legendary minion, and it says battle cry, pick a tribe. All other minions go extinct and are replaced with minions of that tribe. So hold on a second. We gotta take a step back right now. This card has some crazy potential. I especially seeing it ran in. Oh wait, no. Anything can happen is being rotated out, isn't it? Alright, maybe it's not quite as good as I thought it was gonna be. See, I was picturing this in like a Paladin deck, where they just turn a bunch of the minions into Murlocs and then just anything out, like basically an entire board of Murlocs. I could see it being good with elementals though. Elementals are coming into the new meta, and they're based on if you played an elemental the turn before, you get a bonus effect this turn. So having only elementals in the entire game is like really basically makes their abilities all the time. I mean, there will never be a time where you are not playing an elemental the turn before, really. The only problem with this is that you have to wait until turn 8 to play it. But you know, 6/8, it's not bad stats for the ability. It's really, really strong. In terms of that ability potential with the elementals. That's pretty much the only real thing the only real use I see getting out of this card, because it's a very, very limited card, based on what tribes are available, and especially with Dragon Priest being out, Murloc-Adins are pretty much going to be out now. I believe there is a new quest that requires you to summon Murlocs for Shaman, so this could be played in a Murloc Shaman deck. That I don't know how that would do. That would be very weird in the current meta. I don't think it would do particularly well. But you never know. Beast, maybe Beast for some Beast hunters. I could see that being a thing. Beasts are usually pretty coherent together. All right. Anyways, let's move on from this. We got this card. I'm gonna say is a maybe for me. It's very bizarre. What the fuck is this? Alright, so here's another card. This one's coming out, either Spell Bomb. It's a 1-cost spell. It's pretty much available in any deck. Says choose one, draw a card. Or if your hero is a mage, return a minion to its owner's hand. Now, essentially the way this works is if your hero is a mage, then you can return a minion to its owner's hand. However, if you don't and you just play this, it's draw a card. So basically for most decks, it's going to be play one, draw a card, or pay 1 mana to draw a card. So it's essentially just a cycle card at the very beginning of the game. I really only see it being ran in mage decks for the potential of returning a minion to its owner's hand, and that's any minion, too. That's not just an opponent's minion or your minion. It's just return a minion to its owner's hand. So really, it can be used very versatilely. It's very versatile, but I only see it being run in mage for the specifics of it. Pretty much has to be a mage. Bone Splitter. Here's a weapon that's coming out in uNgoRo. It's a 1-cost weapon. It only has 1 use, but it deals 2 damage. So really, it's really only good in early game. Pretty much a turn 1 play. Just to help get rid of one of those like pesky early game minions. I could see it being used to remove pretty much any 1-cost, a lot of the 2-cost minions, but again, if you don't get it early game, it's not that useful. Although it is only a 1-cost. So maybe in some warrior decks where they have cards that buff the weapon, I could see this being more useful. Because with upgrade, you could make it a 3/2. With I think it's Naga Corsair, you can make it a 4/3 if in combination with upgrade. For one cost, it might be okay in later turns, but I don't think it's really gonna be that effective late game. It's really only early game, and I don't really see it being ran in warrior, considering that they're going to be wanting to run pirates way more often. And I don't know if this is really going to be better than the weapons that they already have. So that's the Bone Splitter. Frogmite. Here's the new. All right, everybody, here we go. We got this new tribe coming out. It's a 3-cost 2/2. Artifact is the new tribe. So it costs 1 less for each artifact you've summoned this game. So this is a tribe that essentially works off of playing more of the same tribe, reduces the cost of other shit. So this card, essentially, if you play 1 artifact, then this becomes a 2-cost 2/2. So pretty much this isn't really that great. If you're top decking it, it's not going to be great in early game. However, if you're getting it late game, chances are you've already played artifacts and you're essentially playing this card for free, so it's a 0-cost 2/2. So really, if artifact is going to be a major tribe, this is going to be one of those cards that's played strictly in an artifact deck, and I don't really see it being played in anything else. Leonin's Scimitar. It's another weapon. 1-cost 1/2 instead of a 1-cost 2/1. So it's essentially a cheaper version of the Rogue's hero power. And it can be used by anybody. Unfortunately, it takes up a deck slot. Again, I really only see this being used as like tech maybe versus a pirate deck way early game. Late game, I don't really see it being effective, considering if you make it to late game anyway against a pirate deck, you pretty much have the game won. So it's one of those cards, again, similar to Bone Splitter. I feel like it's a risky put in. It's basically you're taking your chances that you're gonna get it early game, and if you don't get it early game, it's pretty much useless. Again, though, the only deck I could see this being ran in is like a a weapon warrior of some kind that focuses on getting a lot of armor and then buffing his weapons. Which I've tried to do before, and it doesn't really work out very well. It's only okay in terms of win-loss rate. We have a Mire Enforcer. Costs 1 less for each artifact you summon this game. It's a 6 cost 4/4. So you summon 2 artifacts this game. It's a 4 cost 4/4, which is balanced. That's a balanced. That's a very, very balanced card, but it requires you to summon 2 artifacts. So hopefully by the time you get this in your hand, you would have played a few artifacts. I really only see it being ran in artifact decks. I just was told as well that this is going to be changed to an artifact tribe, and it has not been done yet. Apparently this card was still in production and was not meant to be released yet, but I'm being told that it is going to be an artifact as well. So you can keep that in mind, that this is just going to be used to reduce the cost of all your other artifacts, as well as having its own cost reduced by artifacts. Silver Mire. It's a 1 cost 1/1. Gain an empty mana crystal. Wow. So this is an artifact, of course, so it's going to be used to reduce your other artifact costs. But not only that, but you gain an empty mana crystal. Now, this is the first card that we've seen that it can be used for ramp and is not a druid-only card. This can be used in any decks. Do I see it being used in druid to help with ramp? I don't see that being a thing, specifically because it's only a 1 cost minion. Most druids, if they run their hand right, they can get ramp in turn 1 anyway. So this being a 1 cost 1/1 minion, I don't really see it being used in ramp decks. Control decks, maybe. I don't know how much of the ramp stuff is being switched out, but a control druid, or tempo druid rather, maybe intermingled with other artifacts. I could see this being a card. Pretty much any deck that wants to run artifacts, though, at least has a little bit of ramp in it now, which is interesting. So yeah, this artifact subtype is gonna be a run for the money with everyone else. Steel Wall, taunt, can't attack artifact, 0 cost 0/4. Wow. Now this reminds me of the Shield Bearer. It's a 1 cost 0/4 with taunt. However, it doesn't have a subtype, and it can attack if you buff it. So this instead, just you can't attack with it. Doesn't matter what the buff is on it. You could silence it and then it wouldn't have taunt, but that's one of those things that's not really a good idea, I don't think. So 0 cost 0/4 artifact reduces the cost of pretty much a lot of your other cards. I see this being really good in artifact decks. Pretty strong. Especially because it doesn't really matter when you draw. It's not going to cost you anything to play. So that's going to be quite the wall, quite the steel wall, especially against early game pirate decks. I think this could really be a counter to that. Thoughtcast. It's a 4 cost mage spell. Costs 1 less for each artifact you've summoned this game. So, being that it's a mage spell, and it says draw 2 cards, I think the other mage spell that allows you to draw 2 cards is a 3 cost, if I remember correctly. So you play 1 artifact this game, and this is basically, it's basically the other mage spell. Play 2 artifacts though, and you're drawing 2 cards for 2. 3 artifacts, you're drawing 2 cards for 1. So this is one of those cards where pretty much you're only going to be running it in artifact decks. But it's got a lot of potential in one of those. So let's see what else we have out here. Assert Authority. It's a 6 cost. Costs 1 less for each artifact you've summoned in this game. It's a secret. So this is weird, right? Because this is the first secret, and it's a mage secret that is not a 2 cost, I believe. Mage secrets are cost 2 to play. When your opponent casts a spell, counter it and remove all copies from the game. Well, considering you can only really have 2 copies of a spell in the game to begin with, and if they play one before you get a chance to put this out there, this is really only just countering a spell. But if considering the fact that if you play 4 artifacts this game, it's just the same cost as a normal secret. The other problem with this card is it's really easy to bait out, I feel. Other decks will most likely realize that this will be an Assert Authority if you're playing an artifact deck. So they can cast just a real weak spell that they're not going to need, and then it doesn't really matter if the other copy of it has been removed. However, in the case of, I see especially against spell heavy decks that are like really control-y, this could be very useful because a lot of their spells they're really going to need, and they can't really afford to throw any away, or especially if they don't have a good one to throw away in their hand at the time, this can really be a good deterrent to pretty much any good spell-based control decks. So I see this card being okay. It's not going to be great, I don't think. Only used really in artifact decks. But other than that, it's a weird secret spell. I might be wrong about it, but we're gonna have to find out. We got the Bottle Gnomes coming out. It's a 2 cost 1/3 Death Rattle. Restore 3 health to your hero, and it's an artifact. So first off, let's look at the stats. 2 cost 1/3 balanced stats. Death Rattle. Restore 3 health to your hero. That's pretty good for 2. That's a pretty good effect for 2. It's Death Rattle, so it's N'Zothable, I suppose. I don't think it's really great for that. I don't think I really see it being used in any N'Zoth decks. But it is an artifact, so again, pretty much only really used in artifact decks, but it's a good sort of weird control card in that sense that it both buffs your other artifacts by reducing sort of their cost, but also restoring health to your hero if you need it. It's a 2 cost 1/3, so it's a pretty good turn 2 play. I think this card will be pretty solid in the meta. I feel like this is going to be a decent card. A decent card in the meta. Knowledge Thirst. 2 cost mage spell. Draw 3 cards and then choose 1. Discard 2 random cards or discard an artifact. So essentially, there's 2 ways that this card can go. And I don't see it going one of the 2 ways, but okay, so the potential here is that if you don't have an artifact, you're paying 2 to draw 3 cards and then discarding 2 random cards. Now, the fact that it's random really kind of doesn't do much for this. I mean, I could see it being that effect might be better in a Warlock deck, but unfortunately this is a mage spell. Maybe if Warlock had like Renounce Darkness into this, that would be very, very weird though. That's really hard to counter and predict. But Knowledge Thirst anyway, I don't think pretty much it's only going to be run in artifact decks. That's really the only scenario I see for it, is you're paying 2 to draw 3 and then discard 1 artifact. That's paying 2 to draw 2 cards essentially. So you could get rid of a Steel Wall. We've seen Frogmite, we've seen Bottle Gnomes. Those are all artifacts. The Mire Enforcer which, to remind you guys, I was told is going to be an artifact when it's actually released into the game. But I don't really see Mire Enforcer being one that you would want to discard unless you absolutely had to. So yeah, I think this is really only going to be ran in artifact decks, and obviously it's a mage spell, so it can only be a mage artifact, which seems to be sort of a thing that they're pushing. Because they had they're really trying to give mage another archetype, it looks like, because they've got the Aether Spellbomb, which was like, if you're a mage, choose one and then draw a card or return a minion to its hand. Like, pretty much only ran in mage, otherwise it's only used to draw a card. So yep. Sober Hoverguard. It's 5 cost 3/2, but costs 1 less for each artifact you've summoned this game. And it ignores taunt. So essentially, alright, so stat-wise, the stats are really hard to predict with these because it depends on whether you're running... Oh, it's also mage only, right? It's also only a mage only one, so it's pretty much, they're really pushing artifact mage here. But the stats are really hard to sort of decide because 5 costs 3/2. Looking at just that, it's not good. However, the fact that it can be reduced to maybe a 2 cost 3/2 if you play 3 artifacts this game, that's a lot better. Because there were some really early artifacts. For example, if you're playing like Steel Wall and a Silver Mire in turn 1, then you already have 3 mana. You're playing a Frogmite on the next turn for 2, I think it was. No, you'd be playing that for 1, then you still have 2 more mana to hero power. That's already 3 artifacts, so then the next turn you can drop this guy out. So it seems like artifacts are really going to be an early game deck. Very, very aggressive deck. Probably better than Pirates in the current meta. Unfortunately, I think it might be getting a little bit too powerful now. However, a lot of the minions are not very strong on their own. So pretty much any good taunt minion would ruin that, except these guys now ignore taunt. So they can strike face right over a taunt minion. So you pretty much have to get rid of these guys immediately if you can. Otherwise, you're just going to be getting hit. And there's really no way to stop that. So I think this card is going to be very, very strong in the artifact decks. Outside of artifact, don't really see it being a big thing for mage, considering that it's still a 5 cost 3/2 if you're not running artifacts. So the fact that it ignores taunt is really not gonna save it from non-artifact decks. Broodstar. Now this is the last card I have to reveal today, and it is a 9 cost 0/0. We'll get into that here because the effect says costs 1 less for each artifact you summon this game, and this minion's attack and health are always equal to the number of artifacts you've summoned this game, and it ignores taunt. So let's consider this for a second. What all does that mean? That means that turn 1, you're playing a Silver Mire, gaining an empty mana crystal, and potentially playing a Steel Wall. Now that's 2 artifacts right there. Next turn, you're playing a Frogmite for 1, hero power maybe. You could also draw more cards. With there, I saw a couple cards earlier for the mage that allowed you to draw. We can go back to those. Knowledge Thirst here, it could be potentially played on that turn 2, along with a Frogmite to draw 3 cards, and then maybe discard an artifact from that. Bottle Gnomes could be played along with the Frogmite. Now it's a 1. Now you have another 1/3 with Death Rattle, restore 3 health on the board. Thoughtcast at this point would only cost you 1 to just straight draw 2 cards. So yeah, and then that of course leads into more artifacts. Sober Hoverguard could be played right now, for 2 for the 3/2, and that would be the end of your turn 2. So potentially then, you lead into the Mire Enforcers, which are 4/4 minions with reduced cost. That's already down to like a 3 cost 4/4. Essentially, roughly, you might be able to play this turn 5, turn 6, and it would be a 5/5 or a 6/6 that ignores taunt. But then as you continue to play artifacts, this thing gets buffed. So if it's a 5/5 or a 6/6, you pretty much have to one-shot it, or have another way to remove it. I think this might be a little bit too overpowered. It is a mage-only card, legendary as well. So it's really only going to be ran in mage. So Silence would immediately kill it. Polymorphs would immediately kill it. If you did play it on a turn 5 or a turn 6, I mean, pretty much any turn that's like mid-range, you could just kill this with a spell. The real fear from this thing is that if you don't have a way to immediately kill it, I mean, rogues have Assassinate. Blade of Cthulhu would really buff Cthulhu with this thing. So I feel like this is going to be one of those cards that people are going to be able to remove fairly easily. I feel like, okay, here's my overview of the whole. I'm just going to give an overview of the whole thing that I just reviewed for you. These early ones are just some new ones that were thrown out there. I added the background in for thumbnail effect. But with all these artifact cards that are coming out, and especially the mage cards that run off of it, if artifact mage becomes a strong meta, I feel like there are going to be a lot of control cards, or like a lot of control decks that are going to be set up primarily to counter artifacts, or they're going to have specific tech cards to counter artifacts, because this card is actually somewhat easy to get rid of if you've got the tech for it. Priest would be really, really effective at getting rid of this. Otherwise, it pretty much can't be destroyed by minions alone. It has to be destroyed by a spell or destroyed by well, a spell. If it got grabbed by Sylvanas, it would probably just be destroyed. If the opponent has not summoned any artifacts, it would just drop to a 0/0. So yeah, I think this card is going to be useful in only artifacts. However, considering how powerful the artifact mage meta seems to be with this new release, it could very easily be countered. I feel like I'm going to see a lot of tech to specifically counter the artifact mage. But that is my review of these new released cards that I'm showing to you guys. If you guys have any other comments, please leave that in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think of these new cards that are coming out. Do you think my assessment of them is going to be correct, or not? Honestly, it's very up in the air right now. But I think it's definitely gonna give Pirates a run for their money. Pirates are not gonna be good, effective against this. Jade Golems might be too slow versus this deck. Might be. That's one of those things where you're gonna have to see what other cards are being released. Are there any like, how powerful are the elementals gonna be versus this deck? That's gonna be something to sort of consider. I feel like any kind of board buffs are gonna be good as well. Defender of Argus will be effective against this deck. Defender of Argus is already a really good card anyway. Alright, I'm going to stop rambling. I'm going to let this video end. You guys know what to do. Leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thanks everybody for checking out these new cards that are coming out. I'm really excited for them in Journey to uNgoRo. So we will see you guys in the next video.